Good evening. The news gang is here. An empty chair at KICC and a wheelbarrow in Karen. 1,000 ways to kill a political party and other short stories. Occupy until he comes. From France, of cats, rats, and Tuko Pamoja. Also on the show, teachers without students, the new way of reopening schools in Kenya. On the memo, Jamila is searching for Utu at KNH. Yvonne takes a front row seat at the messy, noisy divorce proceedings at Jubilee House. Gashuri's early warning system on Coronagate is punching red. Kai kicks hard on a nation of sheep led by wolves, and the dead are telling tales on the angle. We are starting now. All right, and our sign language interpreter tonight, as ever, Yulan Zale. Ladies and gentlemen, so today at Jubilee House, we saw a rather interesting meeting. I mean, the DP chairing a meeting, or we would assume, I mean, I don't think anyone would have chaired it, but with a number of members of parliament, senators, members of the National Assembly, and so on and so forth. Francis, surprising?
Not at all. Actually, a close observer of what was happening in the last, let's say, few weeks would have foreseen this. The last event at Jubilee House, when the Deputy President went to the headquarters to discuss that not so little matter about the Msambweni parliamentary candidate or the flag bearer for Jubilee, or lack of it, he said some interesting things that day that could have pointed to this meeting. Talking about the need to, regain the party, prepare the party for future elections, and that matter of party elections came. And when that matter of party elections came, it gave the clearest indicator that the Deputy President, who is also the Deputy Party Leader, together with members of Parliament who support him, are angling for party elections. And there's a reason for that. Because they feel that by conducting party elections, then the party leadership will be clearly defined. And that the current party leadership, the Secretary General, the Acting Secretary General, the Acting Vice Chair, who are, or the office bearers who are there on an acting capacity pending party elections, have not been favorable to him, if you may like it that way. Actually, they have said some not so very kind things to him in his own estimation. They accuse him of quite a number of things like undermining the president, early campaigns, and so on and so forth. So obviously, he would want a scenario where the party members conduct elections and he has control of the party and the party organs. Remember, during the so-called purge in Jubilee, all those who are holding key positions, especially parliamentary leadership, were allied to the Deputy President. And so when the purge came, they were removed. And so the Deputy President would want a scenario where he is regaining control of the political party. And that the President was away when this happened is also interesting. And that the soundbites that came from Mithika Linturi and Alice Wahome and the choice of the two speakers to brief the media was also very specific. And what they were also saying is also very interesting. 3 things. 1, party elections. 2, that those who have been saying we have been kicked out of the party or we have no control of the party, they can now see. I think those bites are there.
Yeah. There was no coup, there is no coup. Na hakuna mapinduzi tumefanya katika chama chetu. Ya kwamba nataka kuwauliza, unaweza aje kufanya mapinduzi katika nyumba yako? Chama cha Jubilee ni chama chetu. Chama cha Jubilee sisi ndio tunakifadhili. Kwa hivyo nataka kusema hakuna mapinduzi yamefanyika hapa. Chama chetu ni chama chetu, and we have every reason to always consult on matters that touch on the well-being of our party.
And therefore, it is not out of order for us to meet in our own house, Jubilee Party headquarters. If there is anybody who had doubt that this is still our house and is our house, I think today their doubts are settled.
You see, our party, our house, the choice of words, they are very specific. And so, moving forward, I suspect 2 things will be happening. 1, the pro-DP members of parliament will be pushing for nothing short of party elections, because therein, they believe they can regain control of the party. And number 2, a few of those members of parliament have even been daring the president to dissolve parliament because they believe if they go back to the elections, then probably the president's side of the coalition will lose the majority in the House, in the two chambers of parliament. And so it will be a continuous process of let's conduct party elections, let's dissolve parliament, and square it out on the floor or on the ground, so to say.
Lina's very interesting tone there, you know, kuna mapinduzi, even the choice of words, that may well be, but some of these people have not been to Jubilee House since 2017.
Joe, the word coup was in the lips of the people who spoke at Jubilee House. And what a lot of people would be interested in is more about the symbolism of the activity that took place today in Jubilee headquarters. What does it say? What were they trying to do? Was this the only time they could ask for party elections when the president was out of the country? You know, we are lucky as Kenyans because a lot of time has passed. 3 decades ago, if something like this happened, it would send panic across the country. The use of the word coup will be contextual. It will be actually a coup. Because what this brings to mind when I look at the events of the day is September 1993 in Russia and Alexander Rutskoy going against his boss, President Boris Yeltsin.
Yeah.
And what he did was to rally around parliament and the party hardliners against the president. And for about 6 days, they had a situation which sort of suggested Yeltsin has been replaced by his deputy, Alexander Rutskoy. Back to the symbolism again. In Africa, when you look at most African coups, especially in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they always happened when the head of state was out of the country. When the head of state
even the attempted one in Burundi in 2015, actually, the guy was in Dar es Salaam.
The guy was in Dar es Salaam.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is why the symbolism of this is very, very ugly. And I don't think the deputy president and his team thought this through properly, because it leaves a bit of egg in the face because of the symbolism. In 1971, when Idi Amin overthrew Milton Obote, Milton Obote was away in Singapore. In 1966, when President Gowon, actually 75, when Gowon was overthrown by Obasanjo and his boss, he was in Uganda. So the symbolism of the president not being in the country and something like this taking place is not lost. And you will see in the next few days that the pro-Uhuru allies will be talking about this along those terms, saying that this was a coup.
Especially because, I mean, because it happened when the president was away, and he probably would still have done this with perhaps a different effect, even if the president was here. But Yvonne, it does look to me like we have reached that point where they usually call a point of no return. The Rubicon has been passed, and there's no turning back when it comes to the messy divorce, if it can be called that, in Jubilee.
I mean, and this is interesting, you know, going, and the analogy you use of divorce, you know, a couple, and you wait for one spouse to be away from the house, and then you come in and, you know, maybe try to reassert your position in the house and say it's not over. But I think this points to the fact that this divorce will be messy, will be nasty. Everyone is digging their heels in. Nobody wants to leave, and considering...
And Weta reminded us with casualties.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. and we always have to give credit to Senator Moses Wetangula for that. But it shows you that nobody is going to leave the party, and particularly right after, you know, there was the Jubilee Asili Center, you know, what is happening there. But this tells you clearly that DP Ruto and his allies are saying, we're not leaving. In any case, there is nowhere they can go because, you know, they are tied in this marriage constitutionally. I'm not sure that the deputy president would be willing to leave. And also the idea of pushing for grassroots elections. 4 years since this party was formed, there have been none. And like Gashuri was saying, you know, the interim officials now literally owe their allegiance to the appointing authority, which would be the party leader. And that's why you see the Secretary General and the Vice Chair speaking the way they do. And I guess his push for grassroots elections would mean then that the officials derive their mandate and their power from, you know, the party as a whole, rather than it being appointive. And I guess, you know, all of this, like we said, coming at a time when the party leader is away, and the party leader had some interesting things to say, actually, in response to this in France. I think there was an interview. We do have that soundbite. Because all of this is about 2022 and whether the president, you know, will declare support as he had promised to. And interestingly, I think for the first time, we're hearing the president on this matter, and we're hearing him say this away from home. We have that soundbite from President Uhuru Kenyatta just today speaking in France on whether he will support his deputy, President William Ruto, in 2022.
So you cannot commit today that you will support him in 2022?
My commitment is to this. My commitment is to this process. My commitment is to peace, stability, and prosperity for the people of my republic. That is my number one function. Once we're over that hill, once, as I said, we now start talking about elective positions, you can ask me that question.
Again, still non-committal, what we've heard him say all this time. And interesting that he chooses to say this there, you know, at a time when we've seen what was apparently not a coup. But
it ties in with, and Jamila, I'll come to you in a moment, it ties in with sort of the bigger picture that you're painting, Yvonne, because you see, some people would say you push this hard so that if something happens, you leave saying, you know, we tried, or you push so that there's an attempt to push you out of the party. Because the truth of the matter is there is no party that would engage itself with elections, grassroots elections, certainly not when there is that kind of acrimony. I mean, it doesn't happen in this country. Parties rarely go for those things, if they do at all, and they pick very carefully when they do that. And that's really at the heart of what is wrong, perhaps, with our party politics in this country. The other thing which I think the DP's camp will have to grapple with, remember he has been pushing this narrative that right now people are not interested in BBI, in referendum, all of these other things, that people want to know how we're recovering from COVID-19, what are we going to eat, and all these people who have lost their jobs and all of those things. So he's going to have to deal with this dilemma where, on the one hand, the people who support him are pushing for a grassroots election, which, as the name suggests, grassroots is something that is very involving, involves people going out to push for positions and that sort of thing. And at the same time saying, you know what, this is not a priority for Kenya, because the moment you introduce this atmosphere where people can actually go out and campaign, then you probably lose the argument that this is not the right time for people to go out and try and change the constitution. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how that plays out. But Jamila, you have been itching, I should say, to say something about this, because it is a very strange state of affairs where the president is away, his deputy is doing something here, and the entire Jubilee fiasco, because it really has become that.
I remember the interview, Joe, that you had with the deputy president during the Katiba at 10 period, and he said that we've invested a lot in this party, the Jubilee party, so it won't be easy to let it go. We won't let it go easily, and it's what we've been seeing. I think him trying to say this is the party, because some would say, si atoke tu, aende tu, because now he's clearly being shown he's not wanted. But of course, he said he's not going to let go that easily. And we look at how now the issue about parties, you talk about the history of parties in Kenya and our philosophy about parties in this country. We've said here before that they're just vehicles for election. In fact, a lot of, I was reading an article, I think in the Daily Nation today, and they said about the Registrar of Political Parties has received requests for registering over 400 parties plus. And then makes me look at it in terms of now how the market price for parties is going to start going up, not just in 2022, but right now, because of the political temperatures and the political atmosphere we're seeing in the country, and that it will reach a point where parties are going to become hot potatoes. They are commodities, and their prices are going to go up. I bet you their elected officials or elected senators or members of parliament or whoever they are who are walking around with party certificates in their pockets, just waiting for the moment when they'll be able to use it. Because look at the political atmosphere. We talk about how the deputy president is on one end and Raila Odinga is on the other. These people who are registering these parties are sitting there hoping that, one, if at some point their parties may be required to form a coalition, because remember Jubilee Party was a coalition of 11 small parties, or the chaotic nominations that we usually see, and someone may not get the ticket they wanted, but at least they have this party of theirs that they can use to get into parliament. But this is what we call the briefcase parties. These parties, I would equate them with a parachute in a plane that's about to go down. It is like a landing for a lot of these people, because, as I said, one, because of the chaotic nomination exercise we've seen, and two, because of the opportunistic nature of our Kenyan politics. Kama huwezi enda na ndege, utaenda na gari. Kama gari itashindikana, utachukua pikipiki. Ukishindwa pikipiki, utakimbia. Bora ufike pahali unaenda. So it's amazing
but
about
some people,
what you're seeing.
Some people hit it big. I mean, just ask ODM where they got LDP or where they got ODM or where
even ODM
itself. Yes.
UDM, URP, all of these things. They even including NARC Kenya. I think, remember when NARC basically fell apart, people started NARC Kenya hoping that Kibaki would run on it. Then later on, PNU. He didn't quite know what the party was initially, but in the end he ran on it, and somehow he got a second term. So in a sense, political parties are really, as you said, special purpose vehicles that once the election comes and goes, they are discarded, and people look for new vehicles to go to the next destination. But what we've seen, and I would like us to listen to the DP speaking about the assignments that have been given to him and all of these things, because we have seen the DP increasingly coming out, you know, a bit more in a more assertive way, trying to say, you know, we are in this party to stay, and those kinds of things, and defending himself against people who accuse him of all kinds of things.
Kila kazi, kila wajibu, rais wa Kenya ameniassign, akaniambia, William, mimi nataka ufanye hii. He can confirm there is no assignment the President of Kenya has given to me that I have not discharged with distinction. Amen. So, hawa watu wengine wanajifanya manyapara, wanajaribu kusema, oh, sijui Deputy President, hajafanya. Wewe umejiappoint kuwa nyapara ya Deputy President, na wewe umechaguliwa kufanya kazi. Uende ufanye kazi yako ile umechaguliwa kufanya. Kazi yako sio kuwa nyapara yangu. Wewe kwenda kazi, ufanye kazi ile wewe umechaguliwa na wananchi, fanya hiyo kazi. Wacha kazi ya kujiwekelea ya unyapara.
Joe, this was in response to two things. Number one, you remember an interview that Ngunjiri Wambugu had here? Yeah. And accused the Deputy President of absconding duty, in not so many words talking about undermining the President as a result of the Deputy President's no-show at KICC during the COVID conference. That is number one. You also heard the chairman of the Budget Committee in the National Assembly, Kanini Kega, saying that his committee can even recommend that the budget in the office of the Deputy President be slashed because they claim that he's not doing his job, he's not performing his duties as Deputy President. But you remember that the Deputy President's office budget is part of the presidency budget. Yeah, actually
it's not separate.
It's not separate. Actually, the person who manages, or the accounting officer for the budget allocated to the presidency is the Comptroller of State House. So if you're to reduce that budget, then you will have to reduce it, you know, at the presidency vote, so to say. And obviously this would be seen in context of not trying to cut the Deputy President's legs politically, so to say. But number two, there's a question on whether he did the right thing or the wrong thing in missing the COVID conference. I hear his supporters say, if he has been sidelined all along, why would you require him to appear during that conference? That is one part of the argument. The other part of the argument is that the program was out. He knew that he was supposed to be there. He knew that he was expected.
And State House says he was invited.
Yeah, he was invited. And this goes to show you that what was being discussed as, the tension, the anxiety, the simmering row in Jubilee is now being played out in the open. And as we move on, it will remind you of what happened during the Grand Coalition days, where when the situation could no longer hold, what the Prime Minister Raila Odinga side of the government then and what the President Mwai Kibaki side of the government then used to do is what I would call kusetiana. This side would unleash a scam, and the other one would unleash another one. So it was a bad thing because in terms of the image it wasn't looking very neat, but also I think it was also a good thing for the country because the government, the country's population got to know exactly what was happening inside the government. So the moment on a setiana, it becomes very good. I also think as we move forward, you will see a lot of these things. One side of the government will be unleashing stuff to paint the other side dark. And all this in preparation for what you say is now the grand divorce, if it will ever get there. But the signs that, it's all in tatters are all too clear.
And haven't we seen that already with, the DP's allies raising issues with Huduma number? In fact, going as far as to declare that this could be, a route or an avenue to rig the next elections, which puts him in a very interesting spot. And, LK is the student of history here and the one who can tell us all about this. In a different time, this would have been very easy for President Uhuru Kenyatta to do in the previous constitution. Mm-hmm. He would simply have fired his vice president at the time. But now, they're joined at the hip quite literally, constitutionally. I wonder if the deputy president can leave that without being accused of breaching the constitution, and the president, on the other hand, cannot fire him without... he doesn't have the power to fire him. And that's what, just tells me that they're digging into it. Like he said, they have invested, but it would be interesting to see how this all ends, because they're literally joined together.
But yet Linus, I think that the DP has been trying to make exactly that case that Yvonne is wondering about, that look, I mean, I've been sidelined, I'm no longer in there, and he's literally playing the role of opposition even though he's still in government. Mm-hmm. And he's trying to make a case that he is not part of whatever else might be going on in government, and he's been relishing every opportunity to distance himself actually from what the government of the day is doing. He, when the Standard had the headline of Spectator, he tweeted and say, "Wacha mimi nikwe tu Spectator hapa," and he said, "No one will again accuse me of all of these things." So it does appear that the DP is laying the stage for what would be a divorce that is defined by him essentially distancing himself, saying, you know what, I was part of it, but at a certain point they isolated me, and so I am not part of whatever might be going on there. I mean, a very, very interesting strategy. How far it can go remains to be seen, is it not?
It is a clever strategy because, first of all, it allows him to begin his own political journey by divorcing with the president and by, ironically, dissociating himself from the failures of Jubilee, which is part of. But what we are watching him do, as long as he's in the office, is as good as a dog biting its own tail. He has to chase it, keep biting it, let it bleed, but you have to keep biting it. Unless he quits Jubilee, a lot of people will still hold him accountable on what Jubilee has done. But there's something else the Deputy President has been doing, is trying to get the genesis forgotten, the genesis of all this. Because was he just victimized by President Uhuru Kenyatta? Was it just an overnight thing that then suddenly he's being targeted? That's not true. I think we've said it here before about the genesis of Tanga Tanga. When the president was talking about Tanga Tanga, what was he saying? He was basically telling him, you are running an early campaign, and lately he's been saying that, and I think he spoke to France 24 a while ago and spoke about early campaigns. There is that bit. But jointly, as Yvonne was talking about this joint ticket, Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto must be judged as a pair. They actually appear as the co-accused in terms of how they have executed the mandate as contained in the Constitution of Kenya 2010. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 did not foresee a situation where the president and the deputy president are going to be competitors within a term. This thing was borrowed from the American Constitution, Joe. And you will notice that even in America, where they have a very disagreeable president called Donald Trump, you never hear of Michael Pence. Mike Pence
is non-existent, literally.
He is non-existent.
He has a presidential debate coming up.
Because the first duty of the vice president, the first duty of the deputy president is political obscurity. Mm-hmm. You must serve your boss in silence and in as little visibility as the boss would allow. Mm-hmm. But what are we seeing with the Uhuru Kenyatta, William Ruto pair? Mimi na rais, it's a competition. In fact, it is a bad precedent for Kenya that this is how the first pair under the Constitution of Kenya 2010 has executed the office of president and that of the deputy president. We may give local examples like what happened in Nigeria and Ghana as well, where they had this constitutional marriage, basically, because the president and the deputy president are tied together in the ticket to the end of time. But what we must learn as Kenyans is this is destabilizing. Two, it's not part of our political culture. Our political culture is that of one leader at a time. Mm-hmm. You look at President Daniel Arap Moi, go back to Mwai Kibaki, go back to Jomo Kenyatta. This doesn't happen. If this was the 60s, like what happened today, the takeover of the party headquarters, we would be facing a constitutional crisis right now. We would be facing a crisis in which the other arms of the state, including the military, could actually have to intervene to sort of bring things to order. Because what we are facing now is an outright contest for power between the president and the deputy president. One last thing I want to say, Joe, why we are here also is because we have a dysfunctional party system. Mm. Ordinarily, parties should have a disciplinary system that can dictate how the leaders within the party would relate. I want to cite the example of South Africa. In ANC, they recalled President
Zuma.
Thabo Mbeki.
Yes,
Thabo Mbeki was recalled.
And then,
and by recalling, it's not like they were assigning him to some other duties.
Yeah.
That was actually, they was actually firing him.
Yeah.
The party is that powerful. But they did it in a tidy way. Nobody died. No tribe was accused of doing anything. In Kenya right now, look at how this is playing out. It's playing out this way because we don't even have strong parties. We have the deputy president saying they don't have a party. They are trying to reclaim it like, oh, let's go sit in the headquarters so that we can belong. This is the sad state of our political parties, and it leads to the unstable governance that we are witnessing right now.
Gashuri, 1 minute about what Linus has said. He mentioned the president speaking about 2022. I think we need to listen to that soundbite where he spoke with France 24 today, and then we can continue.
Just very last question. You were talking about once you're over the hill. You're going to be over the hill in 2022. There's not going to be, like in other country, a change of the constitution whereby...
I mean, over the hill in these issues that we're talking about.
I understand, but you're not going to seek a third mandate or become prime minister after a constitutional change.
The president says 2022 year Harudi, but the point is now he's irked by what he's been calling early campaigns that the deputy president has engaged in. The political mood is on, and it's going to go on until August 2022 when we have the general elections. But I think we need to look at it in terms of what happened at KICC. I think for the deputy president, skipping that event reminds me of when we had the first announcement about COVID-19 in the country, when we had it at the steps, I think, of Harambee House, and the president spoke and he was flanked by officials from the ministries and also cabinet secretaries. and the deputy president was not there. So I think he sat and said, well, hamukunialika when this started, mara ya kwanza, why should I come now when it's 7 months down the line? Number one. Number two.
But he did have a parallel one.
I did.
Yes, I remember. Yes, that's right.
In a parallel one. And number two.
And he should have invited the president.
Yes.
And I think number two, we need to look at now the campaigns and how the vice president has been conducting them, what we are calling the hustler narrative that has been going on, the wheelbarrows that we are seeing, and the borders that are being given out, and the delegations that the deputy president has been inviting in Karen and meeting in different parts of the country. I think the DP is trying to change our whole, political culture in terms of how we vote. As Kenyans, we are known to vote along tribal lines, our ethnicity, our communities. We vote along those lines. Clearly, that's what because we believe that mtu wangu akipata, mimi pia itanifikia. But he's trying to change that platform of tribal blocks. He's trying to change that because I think he's trying to appeal to hustlers. And we have hustlers across all communities. Wale ambao kwa Kiswahili tunaweza kuwaita walala hoi. We have them all across every community in this country. Has those people who are calling hustlers, people who are trying to earn a living, who are trying to hustle, who are trying to run businesses or trying to run to feed their families. And I think the deputy president's mission is to create a different voting pattern, because we've said it here before. He needs each and every vote that he can get to be able to clinch the presidency, and is now trying to change what we are all used to as Kenyans, voting along those tribal blocks. And now he's appealing now to people from across, using that hustler narrative versus the dynasty.
How effective would that be?
Good question.
Are we structured in that way that this can actually be, a classist sort of debate?
Something fundamental obviously has to change in our politics if that narrative. Assuming that at its very theoretical underpinning, that is what is driving that. Because, we know that in this country there's always a lot of opportunism that comes where people create narratives that they don't quite believe in. So it remains to be seen whether this class politics, if it were to be called that, is actually founded on an ideological platform, or it is something that we're just talking about. Why do I say that? Look, everybody has noticed how the voting patterns have been. How do you explain the fact that when Kibaki is running for president, he will get sweep across central province that it was then, or the counties in that region? Are you telling me that all those people think exactly the same way, have the same problems and everything? And you see the same thing in Siaya, for example, or Homa Bay when Raila Odinga is running. How do you explain that? The fact of the matter is that in this country, political mobilization has been done with the ethnic group as the basic unit of political mobilization. And that is really founded in our history, where people feel safer when they retreat to their sort of ethnic enclaves, if you like. If Francis, today you walk into an office and someone is giving you a difficult time and then you speak in the language from Banana, the person might actually do something different, walk you from one office to the next, and the whole scenario changes. So there's a sense in which people feel safer when they are within those confines of their ethnic communities. And that is what politicians have capitalized on very, very skillfully over time. So for the hustler theory as it is now, or for that so-called movement to have traction in a way that can affect how we vote in this country, then it has to surmount this very traditional way in which we have always organized our politics. Because we need to take a break, but
Gashuri has a burning point.
I was itching to say something. You see, every election has a certain dichotomy in terms of, I would call them binary contrast. This versus this. Right. 2002, you had the old order in terms of governance versus the new order. Then you've had a contest that has reformists versus non-reformists. 2013, you remember the young people, the digital versus the old people, the analog. You remember even the stories of Vasco da Gama, the stories of Vasco da Gama and everything else. So every election has a dichotomy. Now the challenge is, do those dichotomies relate to how people vote? Would you, for example, tell me in 2013, the young people, the so-called digital people, voted for the Uhuru Ruto team, while the old people voted for Raila Odinga team? That is not necessarily the case.
The old people were being carried on the backs in Central.
Because they are young people.
They must have been 17 years.
They are young people who voted for President Uhuru Kenyatta, like there are old people who voted for him. There are also young people who voted for Raila Odinga, like there are also old people who voted for him. But more importantly, look at how voter registration, the mobilization around voter registration and the voter turnout is done. It is not about young, old, it's not about rich, poor, it's about certain desired outcome, such that if you do your calculations, actually many people look at an election outcome right from the voter registration, and you'll see people computing the numbers, and like if this region, if this region unites with this region, this is likely to be the outcome. You remember that narrative, that story by Mutahi Ngunyi some time back about tyranny of numbers. It brought a lot of issues. But what did you use? The voter registration and how people registered. And the voter turnout also is a great indicator in terms of how the poll outcome will be. So now the sustainability of the Hustler movement is where now the challenge is. Because you will have to surmount the old order of ethnic mobilization to a new order of hustle. And you know, it's also telling you that if you look at the number of people who are, you call it the hustlers, ordinary folks doing ordinary things, they account for almost 80% of the country, because there are border people in Banana like there are in Siaya. There are mamambogas in Kakamega like there are in Msambweni. There are, you know, saloonists and barbers across the country. So now the issue is galvanizing them, galvanizing their hustle, and turn it into a vote block.
As you take a break,
let me just quickly, Joe, point out a few things. When we were growing up, when KANU was the only party, how candidates were elected or campaigned, they had to choose symbols. And I still remember in Transmara, Kilgores, we had tar, we had Simba, we had torch. Yeah, there was another one with, I think, a spear and stuff like that. Guys, nothing has changed. Politics is shaped by slogans and symbols, which is why I wouldn't put too much emphasis on this hustler versus dynasties thing. It's not going to transform our politics overnight. It's not suddenly going to make people vote along ideals or vote along classes. No, not at all, because this is mere sloganeering. And politicians do this from time to time, sometimes even to make their own personal transitions. Because everybody seems to forget that Deputy President William Ruto is serving his 7th year as a Deputy President of the dynasty.
Yeah.
And what he's saying is, let me transition as the dynasty Deputy President to become
the hustler
president. Yeah, which is basically the usual journey of making your political ambitions realized. So it is as empty as my Kilgore's torch, Simba, and all those things were in those days.
Joe, as you take a break, one second, there's some breaking news. I'll just say it in Swahili. Omari Boga ndiye mshindi wa tikiti ya chama cha ODM katika mchujo wa chama hicho uliofanyika mapema leo katika eneo bunge la Msambweni. Boga alimbwaga mpinzani wake Nicholas Zani kwa zaidi ya kura 6,183 dhidi ya 530 aliyopata Zani kati ya vituo 61 vilivyoshiriki katika mchujo huo. Boga atapeperusha bendera ya chama cha ODM katika uchaguzi mdogo wa Msambweni ulioratibiwa kufanyika tarehe 15 mwezi Disemba.
And that is where the new battlefront will be now between
Boga and Boga Zani.
Yeah. Okay. Boga Tosha Mboga.
All right. let's take that break.
Okay.